Hello humans, it's just Martine and it's already way past my bedtime. It's 9:50, which might not be late for some of you, but I typically try to turn off the lights by like 9:20, so oops. But Amy commented on my booktube and authortube newbie tag that she would like to see a vlog of me reading public domain books. So Amy, I'm gonna do you one better. I'm gonna make it a series. I already have too many series ideas for this channel. But Amy, you've added another one. So here we go, public domain. So of course I went to my trusty Project Gutenberg, and the theme of this one is going to be children's fiction, children's classics, as you were. So I chose 5. I have no idea how long this video is going to take to make, because I'm doing this on top of what I regularly want to read, and I'm going back to college very soon. This could be a deadly mistake. But here we go, 5 children's books, so I'm gonna show you what I picked out. Okay, this is my library on my computer. Ignore these 3 books. I read Dracula and The Picture of Dorian Gray for a class, and Jane Eyre came with this computer. I'll read it one day. Today is not that day. The 5 books I chose The Jungle Book. I chose The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is more of a novella. Thank goodness. I chose The Story of Dr. Dolittle, Anne of Green Gables, and The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. That's right. I have not read any of these books, but I've heard of all of them, or I've watched the movies for them. You know the drill. I've even seen the Muppets version of The Wizard of Oz, but I've never read it. So now I'm going to. Public domain. Here we come. For those of you who don't know, public domain in the United States basically means that a book is a certain number of years old, so the copyright doesn't count anymore, and so you can get those ebooks and some audiobooks of them for free. So I got all these ebooks for free, which is exciting. And Amy suggested this because I mentioned that I only read cheap and free books most of the time because I don't have money to spend on books. And also, all these people out here buying new books are sleeping on older books. So here we go. Public domain, all the way. My head already hurts just thinking about this. Thanks for the suggestion, Amy. So, today I started The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It's only been a couple of minutes. I'm 22% of the way in. I am loving it. I love all the descriptions, and the characterization of Ichabod Crane is just so good, and I'm excited to see what happens when any type of plot seems to be appearing, because so far we're just getting like the lay of the land and learning about the characters, which is totally fine with me because I'm loving it and I love characterization and it's great, but I know that things are going to happen, so I'm curious to see if that detracts from the way the narrative is told or if it only adds to it. The setting, impeccable. The characters, impeccable. The reading time, impeccable, because it's a really short book. This is the shortest one of my 5 picks for this video. I am pleased so far with it. I am 54% of the way through The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and it is turned into a love story of sorts, which is interesting because although I've only seen clips from like the Disney version here or there, I didn't really consider it as a romance. It's just kind of a horror thing in my mind, like a very mild horror, but still like kind of not gothic necessarily, but dark. You probably know what I mean. Anyway, so I'm 54% of the way through that, and still some of the descriptions are outrageously written. Like, the writing is so flowery. I hesitate to say that the author has used the same word twice, and yet it flows so smoothly. Of course, some of the ideas are a bit outdated. That's to be expected in public domain books. That doesn't mean I think that it's okay that they're in them. I think creators should always be held to a higher standard when it comes to representing other people, especially those with different races, sexualities, etc. of themselves. But I do understand that it's bound to come up in public domain works because they are older and there are some very outdated ideas in the world. But other than that, it's been really, really good. They've mentioned the Headless Horseman like near the beginning, but again, I think we're about to get into like a darker part of the story. He's headed to a party and it's an autumn evening and he's got a horse, so I think things are going to start happening. In one day I managed to read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, first book that I'm going to read for this public domain children's video, and I gave it 5 stars. Warning, if you're thinking about picking up this novella / short story, I don't really know how it would be classified. It's shorter. We'll say that, is that it is heavy on the descriptors. There is very little plot. I loved that about it. I loved the descriptions of Sleepy Hollow. I loved the descriptions of Ichabod Crane. I think the meaning of the story is a lot clearer with those descriptions instead of a focus on plot, because otherwise it's just going to be like a, I don't know, a scary tale instead of a story about the way that stories and places and the types of people we are affect our perceptions of mundane events. I don't know which one I'm going to read next, so I can choose between The Story of Dr. Dolittle, The Jungle Book, Anne of Green Gables, and The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. I know I have a hold on the audiobook for Anne of Green Gables and then one more of them, but I forget which one. So I just checked, and I also have a hold on the audiobook for The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. So I'm not saying I'm necessarily going to listen to those, but I can switch between reading and listening if I want to. So I'm going to choose either The Story of Dr. Dolittle or The Jungle Book for my next read, but I don't know which yet. Either way, it's going to be longer than The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is sad, but maybe it will be as good. That would be great. I really don't actually want to decide what my next public domain read will be, but I don't want it to be one of the audiobooks that's on hold, like one of the ones that I could listen to audiobook for once the hold comes in. So I'm gonna flip a coin between the other two choices. Heads, I'll read The Story of Dr. Dolittle, and tails, I'll read The Jungle Book. I'm not good at flipping these things, so I'm just kind of going to throw it into the air. It's tails, so I will be reading The Jungle Book next. I'm 14% of the way through The Jungle Book. So far it's very different from the Disney movie, which I already knew it was going to be, but it's still interesting to see. I feel really bad for Mowgli because he tried to be part of the pack his whole life, and then they kind of just betrayed him when their older leader died. Also, he already knows Bagheera and Baloo because they were the ones that saved him when he was just a baby, both of them, not just Bagheera. So I'm interested to see how that relationship changes, if it does, and right now he says he's going to go home. We'll see what happens next, but the next chapter heading mentions Kaa. I'm assuming that, much like the movie, he's going to go and try to get to the village, and things are going to get in his way. And that's going to be the whole idea. But I really enjoyed getting to see Mowgli and the pack in like a more dynamic way than you get to in the movie. Like a more detailed description of how he fits in the pack and why Shere Khan hates him. And also the book like really emphasizes the power of fire, which doesn't come up until later in the movie. And it's definitely a big examination of what it means to be a human, which is cool. And the relationship between animals and humans. So I'm interested to see what it has to say. Because again, even like with The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, some of these things don't really feel like children's stories, but they are. There's just so much in them, and also the language I probably wouldn't have been able to understand when I was younger, but times have changed, so I guess it could be written in that way for younger people in the past, but it's still interesting to see. I'm 25% of the way into The Jungle Book, and I was wrong in my prediction. Instead, we did a flashback to the time when the monkeys stole Mowgli. It's also very interesting to note that I feel like the roles of Bagheera and Baloo are kind of switched in a sense in this. Like Bagheera, although he's firm, he is very soft towards Mowgli. Baloo, on the other hand, is a wise teacher and very strict with Mowgli. Like, he beats him to try and teach him the laws of the jungle, basically. Not like heavily, but he's much stricter than Bagheera is because he wants Mowgli to survive, and Bagheera cares more about like his well-being. I don't know if that made any sense. It's just interesting to note that Baloo is much more of a serious character in the book than in the Disney movie. And yes, I'm going to continue comparing it to the Disney movie because almost everybody has seen the Disney movie, The Jungle Book, but obviously not almost everybody has read the original book, The Jungle Book, even though it's public domain. At least if you're in America, for sure, you can download the ebook for free, and I recommend. So far, 25% of the way through, and I recommend. I think my favorite part of The Jungle Book so far is the concept of the law of the jungle and just like the politics of jungle living, as it were. I think it's so interesting because like these animals do live in harmony or like peaceably in comparison to humans, and so trying to see a human create a reason for that type of harmonic ecosystem is really interesting. Also, although people don't like Kaa just saved Mowgli's life. He's not the villain of this book so far, is what I'm learning. I mean, we all know that Shere Khan is like the big bad. Kaa is not really a little bad here either. He's just like a morally gray character, but he helps the main character, so it's all good. I'm tired, I'm not making any sense. The point is, law of the jungle, good. Kaa, not totally evil. Okay, so we got to see Mowgli with the humans. Everything is messy. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be one continuous plot A lot is happening. This is way better than the movie. Just saying. Way better. Okay, so, I feel dumb. So, basically, I finished up, the part where, like, Shere Khan is defeated, and it was like, what? There's still, like, half the book left? I was like, how's this possible? What's gonna happen next? And then I flipped the page, and I started reading about seals. And I was like, what? So it turns out that the Jungle Book is a series of different stories. So no, that's, they aren't meant to be chronological. That's why the stories about Mowgli were not chronological. I was very confused. So I'm done the most famous stories from the Jungle Book, and now I'm moving on to the less famous ones, including this one about a seal, which I spent the first like 15 pages being very confused by, so now I have to get my bearings in that, because I just realized what was going on. So this seal story is about this white seal named Kotick. He just wants to find a quiet place for the seals where no humans can kill them. He's precious. Freedom for seals. Alright, I started The Wonderful Wizard of Oz today, and I'm 3 chapters in, which is about 13% of the way in, and so far, it's super cute. It's very fast-paced, which I appreciate. Glinda, first of all, has not been named, but second of all, is old? She's old? Very confused. No adaptation I've ever seen has ever portrayed her as old, and I'm shook. Alright, Scarecrow, done. On to the next character. Oh, I'm shook. The good witch that Dorothy met earlier was not Glinda. It was the other good witch. What? I'm about to go to bed, so I'm sorry for the low energy, but I just finished The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and I kind of want to give it 5 stars. It was pure delight in a like 5-hour audiobook. It was so cute, even though like I know the story, like I've seen a ton of movie adaptations, including the Muppets one, which I think has got to be one of the best. Yeah, I already told you my thoughts about Glinda. I was shook that it was not the same good witch as before. There were also a couple adventures that are like never included in most of the common movie adaptations, and honestly the conflicts were like, I feel like in the movies they make the Wicked Witch a bigger piece of it because it's like spooky, but really the main conflict is just Dorothy getting back home. So it's not like the most intense thing ever, but for kids it's like a super cute story. I totally understand why it's a classic. I'm kind of curious now about the other books, which is a dangerous path to go on, but I think I'm gonna give it 4.5 just because the pacing was a little weird for my liking and it wasn't as tense as it could have been. But then again, it's a children's story, so like if I was a child, like I don't know how I would have felt. But yeah, just pure delight. That's all I can say about it. On to the next read. The story of Dr. Dolittle is so cute so far. He can talk to animals because he learned, and I love him. I'm reading the story of Dr. Dolittle and they just ran into Africa. This book is so cute. Okay, so I just finished the story of Dr. Dolittle. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was cute, but there were some things that really didn't age well. I mean, if I think about this like a kid hearing the story, then the stakes were incredibly high. But as an adult reading this, I felt like the solutions to problems was too easy. I mean, it was cute and I enjoyed it, but like it wasn't my new favorite thing or anything. The same way that like The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, I was like, this story is really cute, and even though like I'm familiar with the story because I've seen like the movies and stuff, it just made me really, really happy. And this one was a quick read and it was fun, but that's pretty much all it was. So 1 book left to go, Anne of Green Gables, and then I can wrap up this video. All right, it's Friday, September 25th, and here's the sitch. So my final read for this quote-unquote secret TBR of 5 children's classics available through Project Gutenberg is Anne of Green Gables. For Anne of Green Gables, I am listening to the audiobook because it was available from my library. Shout out to my library. There are a couple things to note so far about the first 11% of Anne of Green Gables. I listened to like 1% of it last night before falling asleep, and another 10% of it now as I was finishing getting my steps for the day. First, some background on me and the story. Growing up, my sister read and loved Anne of Green Gables. I tried to read it. Granted, I didn't give it much time. I read like the first 5 pages, and I thought it was boring, so I didn't read it. Part of my family is Canadian, so I've always kind of wanted to read it simply because it is set in Canada and I love Canada, and my sister has definitely always wanted me to read it. I'm pretty sure I've heard part of the audiobook as I was falling asleep growing up to one of the later Anne books, but I can't remember which one for the life of me, and I have literally no memory of it besides the fact that I'm pretty sure it happened. So all that being said, this is finally me giving a go. This is my pick dedicated to my sister on this experimental reading blog. So far, I'm really enjoying this book. I think I'm definitely glad I didn't read the whole thing when I was younger, because maybe then I would have been like, I didn't like it and I'd never read it again. But like, this is the perfect time in my life to be reading it for a couple different reasons. One, the audiobook narrator, for some reason I love. Voice is so calming. And then as I study like the dependency system and child advocacy, it's interesting to see like the perspective of this fictional orphan and such, the perspective of the child of feeling unwanted. She's also just a super unique child, but I don't think I would have gotten her growing up. All that to say that I think it's really, really cute so far, and I think I'm going to love it, which is really, really exciting because my sister has been wanting me to read this book and love it literally since I can remember. One interesting thing of note, a word on the first page. One of the words on the first page, or what I guess is the first page from the audiobook listening experience, is the word decorum. Interesting to be reading this book with a word like decorum on the first page at a time like this when only recently a couple of my friends and I have declared decorum as one of our favorite words. We use it incessantly, so to be listening to this book set in Canada after having these discussions about a word like decorum with friends who all have Canadian family members, and it to appear wild. It was absolutely wild. So all that to say that I'm really liking it so far. It's September 27th and I just finished Anne of Green Gables. I give it 5 stars. I definitely think, as I mentioned before, that this was the right point in my life to read this. I still firmly believe that like I wouldn't have gotten it when I was younger, or I wouldn't have admired Anne's character when I was younger, and I would have found the writing boring instead of literally beautiful and comical in some ways. I just placed a hold on the second book for my library because I need to read it as soon as possible. I love all the characters desperately. Spoiler alert, I was very close to crying when Matthew Cuthbert passed away. There were tears forming in my eyes, they just didn't roll down my cheeks. I think this story captures a good deal how it feels to be young, but like in a very extreme way. Like, this is a very specific character, but in this specific character, you can find a lot of your feelings like reflected. And I really want to see her get to my age right now and see how she handles that, and like looking into the future. I know there are like 8 books in the series. My library only has the first 2, but we'll find a way to read the other ones at some point. As a side note, I feel like my favorite part of Anne of Green Gables had to be when the chapter like Matthew insists on puffed sleeves. That was everything to me. And that was my 5th and final book for this children's classics edition of Reading Project Gutenberg books. So I want to go over the total results. Starting with The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, I gave that 5 stars. I gave The Jungle Book 3 stars, The Wizard of Oz 4 stars, The Story of Dr. Dolittle 3 stars, and Anne of Green Gables 5 stars. So I got 2 5-star reads, 2 4-star reads, and 2 3-star reads. So nothing bad here. They're classics for a reason, I suppose, but not everybody vibes with classics. So I think of the 5, Anne of Green Gables was probably my favorite, but that was also, I think, my prediction and definitely my hope going into this. I think it's interesting reading these children's stories for the first time as a young adult because they're written for children, but in some ways I feel like they're so much more meaningful as an adult. Like, they would have been fun stories growing up, and the ones that were like movies and stuff that I watched, they were fun stories. But children's classics, there's just this feeling that feels like the heat from a single coal in your heart that just warms you from the inside out. The writing is so specific in these ways, but like very similar among these 5 books in that type of older way, but without this like dankness or darkness that might be in the adult literature from the time. It's just like soft and strong and good-hearted and happy. I feel like people should read these children's classics more often than maybe they do as adults, whether it's a reread or a first-time read, for sure. And I would recommend all 5 of these. And if you're in the United States, at least you can access these for free because they're public domain, which is why they're available on the Project Gutenberg website. This was a very fun time. I'll hopefully do another episode of this soon with a different category of Project Gutenberg reads, but I think this first one was a success. So if you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and comment down below. Have you read any of these books? If so, which is your favorite? If you haven't read any of them, which are you most interested in? Which category of books available on Project Gutenberg would you like to see in the next episode of this? And go ahead and subscribe for more reading, writing, and college lifestyle content on Wednesdays and Sundays. And until next time, bye humans, bye!